Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Monge, Gender Practice Co-Lead at APCO. We're a global advisory firm where we focus on policy advocacy for intersectional issues such as gender equality. I'm joined by two esteemed panelists today to talk about women's representation and perspectives on the global stage. I'll turn to the panelists to introduce themselves, and then we'll get started. And Maha, maybe we start with you.
Thank you, Nicole. My name is Maha Akil. I'm from Saudi Arabia. I'm a former director at the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Currently, I'm a university lecturer of international relations and communications and a social entrepreneur.
Hi, I'm Christina Lunz from Berlin, Germany. I'm also a social entrepreneur. I'm the co-founder and CEO of the Center for Feminist Foreign Policy and an author.
Great. Well, thank you for joining. And just to set the scene today, so everyone knows what we're talking about, we're going to be discussing women's role in rewriting the global agenda. As this global landscape that we're all operating in undergoes sort of the rapid transformation that we're seeing, driven by things like climate change, new technologies, and shifting economic priorities, the way we build cities and design work and govern innovation is being reimagined and changed before our very eyes. Industrial policy is reshaping economies, AI is redefining productivity, and the industries of the future are taking shape amid these rising conflicts and geopolitical tensions. And yet, even with that, women's perspectives remain largely absent from these crucial debates, from foreign policy and economic strategy to climate action and urban design. This underrepresentation limits the quality and inclusiveness of decision making. And policies built without gender diverse perspectives risk overlooking social realities and perpetuating already existing inequalities. So today we're going to explore why integrating women's voices at every level of governance and policy is vital to crafting resilient, equitable, and forward-looking solutions in a world of transition. Sound good?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Great. So my first, now there's a couple of questions that we'll ask the panelists. Not necessarily easy questions, but really important ones. So the first, a study done by UN Women showed that women participation in peace processes, when women are participating in those peace processes, the probability that an agreement will last at least 15 years increases by 35%. So the question is, how can women's leadership and participation reshape approaches to conflict, peace building, and diplomacy in this increasingly fractured world? Don't know who wants to take it first.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure. I mean, we all know that women are the most to suffer during conflicts, but unfortunately, when it's time for peace negotiations and mediation, they're absent from the table. And the presence is important to reflect their views and their experiences, which will be then reflected in the final documents that will be adopted. And so when their inputs are not included early on in the process, because usually what happens is that they're brought in as an afterthought after everything has been discussed and negotiated and agreed on, and then they're brought into the table just for a token and as a picture. So their inputs are missing, and it's important to have their input, as I said, for the final document, the agreement that will be adopted, which will then impact their life afterwards. Their rights, their participation politically, socially, economically, in every aspect, and that will be missing because they were not included in the process early on. So in terms of conflicts, yes, unfortunately, women tend to be excluded, and it's ironic that the conflicting parties, those who are in the battle who committed violations, atrocities, genocide, etc., are the ones who are involved in the discussions for peace, while the ones who suffered the most are not included.
Thank you. It's great perspective. Kristen, I turn to you to respond as well.
There's not much I can add. Maybe just like a broader context or perspective for a second, because also when you gave your introduction, I think it's so important that also because yesterday, as we are recording this, was the International Day to End Male Violence Against Women. And that is so important because all that we are talking about here, what you mentioned in your intro and what you just mentioned regarding peace building and conflict resolution, has to do with structural violence, structural male violence. And our societies around the world, they have been built for thousands of years in a patriarchal manner, and that means structural epidemic violence, male violence towards women to keep them, like literally physical violence. In Germany, for example, every hour 15 women suffer male violence. In South Africa here, we heard from the protests last weekend on the eve of the G20 that every day 15 women are killed, femicides. And this, it's a national disaster.
Yeah.
South Africa just declared it this way, and it should be declared this way every way. And then next to the physical direct violence, we have structural violence. And the exclusion through not inviting, through kicking them out, through laws and regulations and traditions and culture, that is structural violence. And also having said that, I also want to add, and no one here said it yet, which I'm very happy about, that I really don't like the term female empowerment in these kind of conversations. So I'm glad we're not talking about that, because it's such a patronizing way. Female empowerment assumes that we have to go and help women to raise their voice and like spread their wings. But if you didn't cut their wings in the first place, you would not have like to help them to spread them.
And allow me to add to that is that as I said, even though women are the ones who most to suffer during conflicts, but they're also agents of change, and they're active as peace builders, as mediators at the grassroots level, at the community level, and they're the ones who are keeping the family alive, the community surviving, and that role is ignored usually during peace processes and negotiations. And including the media as well, there's a recent report that says even though coverage of conflicts have increased sixfold, the share of women was only 5% out of that reporting. Wow. And only a very, very, very small fraction of that mentioned anything about the role as leaders within their community and their activism at the community level. So that's another way of excluding and marginalizing women.
Yeah. Exclusion does take many forms in sort of this environment, which I think is important to acknowledge and contextualize. Pivoting us just a little bit, because the climate reality, women are disproportionately affected by a lot of this sort of impacts of climate change, and we just saw that at COP30 in Brazil, that despite extreme skepticism of this, if this would even happen, a new gender action plan was actually agreed upon and recognized that women and marginalized groups are climate leaders. So my question is, how do you think integrating women's perspectives and expertise lead to more just and effective responses to the climate crisis and the industries that it's transforming?
Go ahead.
We know that women are disproportionately affected by any type of environmental crisis and disaster. And that is because of the, again, mostly norms and traditions and how they should behave, how they're confined to the private space and to the household, how they're not being taught how to swim as much as men are being taught. In the tsunami 2004, not here in the region, in Sri Lanka and Thailand and the region, it was disproportionately, I think it was 60 or 70% of women being killed, precisely because of these traditions, but also because of clothing rules and how they should dress and how they should behave and where they should be and what skills they should have. So it's whenever we talk about making policies or drafting policies or implementing policies that actually work for everyone, it literally means taking into account the different security needs of all of society. And because of exclusion, structural violence, traditions, culture, the security needs of women are very, very different. So unless we realize that first, then implement it, we will not have policies that work for all.
True. And added to that is that women ownership of land is very low. And so in climate change and crisis, women are most affected because they're the ones who lose. They already don't own land, and they also don't have access to financial resources or to land, even though women represent over 40% of the labor force in agriculture, and yet they only own like 15%.
Yeah, it's quite low.
It's very low.
Yes.
So that's another way where they're affected by climate change, because even their source of income is lost once you have floods or fires or all these changes to the climate. So that's another way. And of course, culture plays a role in being disinherited from the land and losing control over and power of the land.
Yep. Yes, very important points, and women make up a vast majority of farmers, and yet own so little of the land and of the crops of which they grow, which is a real challenge. My final question: what changes are needed within policymaking institutions to ensure that gender perspectives genuinely inform governance rather than remain tokenistic?
Well, I would say that a very important way is inclusion, to take policies, a political will to include women. And I would give an example of Saudi Arabia. Once a political will was made to increase the participation of women in all aspects, in all fields, and even at the higher position, then you can see the impact and the influence of women on society and policies. But there's also the problem, generally speaking, is this implementation gap. So it's not just adopting policies and programs or including women, but also implementing the laws. Sometimes what you have is, okay, you have the laws written on paper, but there is no implementation mechanism. And so it's not really reaching or affecting women at the community level. So I would say political will, more inclusion of including women and throughout the decision-making process, and not at the final stage, as I said. And in terms of conflict resolution, work with the community, with the civil society, with the women groups at the grassroots, the community level, and not just impose or bring in one-size-fits-all policies and try to implement them.
Yeah.
And all I want to add to that is, and also have hard quotas. So we have seen historically an unjustified overrepresentation of men just based on their gender. So we need quotas to cap and limit the overrepresentation of men in order to have a just policy making. Yeah.
Great. Those are all our questions. I think, covered a wide range of sort of issues within this space, but it's very important perspective to share and to continue these conversations and to talk about ways that solutions that there might be to sort of navigating some of these challenges. So thank you both very much for sharing in this today, and thank you.
Thank you.